You still remember that feeling of guilt and shame after being caught or found out that you were looking at pornography? How about that moment your wife threatens to leave you because of your addiction or bad habits? In this episode, I'm going to share my personal story and struggles with pornography and also share some insight on how to start getting the help to overcome it on the 318 Project.
This is the 318 Project, a guide to equip men through godly principles and develop as husbands, fathers, and sons. And now, your host, Ryan Hare.
Hello, I'm Ryan Hare, and thanks for joining me on this episode of the 318 Project. Now, this topic came about, and I felt that I needed to just do an episode on this. Recently, there's a group of Christian brothers, and we have a group chat just encouraging one another. And recently, one of the gentlemen on here in our discussion brought up that he had found that both of his teenage sons had been looking at pornography on their phones. And so this just raised a big discussion just of talking and trying to encourage. Now, as I'm talking about this and just bringing this up, and I'm putting this out here right now as a disclaimer, I am not certified as a therapist, a doctor, or anything. These are just personal thoughts that have come through my personal struggles and also just studying and researching a lot of this. I'm going to give you some statistical facts and numbers and just sharing with you even what God says about all this. Now, as we're talking about this, you can probably, in your mind, as I'm talking, sharing about this, thinking back of a specific time, a date, maybe you can picture the scene, the images, or the act that you may have seen, whether it was a magazine, a video, or a movie. And I'm not trying to stir up some of those old pleasure feelings again, but I'm wanting you to kind of take this moment and think that you can still remember everything about those moments. And it's strange how our mind can fixate and remember these details of these images, but yet there's other things that come to us and we're like, I can't remember this time, this date, this person, but yet we can remember these images and how they are ingrained in our mind. And that's how the power pornography has on us, not just mentally, but physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Now, I can even take you back to the first times that I personally saw a magazine or an image, a picture, movie, whatever it was. The first time for me was when I was 8. Now, we lived in a small town because of where my dad worked, but there was me and a couple of friends. We were out playing, and there was a large field behind this apartment complex where we were at, and there was kind of this old broken down shed building, nothing real big. It was just a small farm shed type thing that had just been old over years and had fallen over to a point. And we could go up under there and it was a shelter and all this. Well, one day we were kind of just looking around, and one of my friends started digging, and he found this tin box. It was rusted and dirty and all that, but he opened it up, and there were several of these Playboy magazines. And this was they were older ones, but still, even after all these years, in my mind, I could probably kind of give you the details, and I'm not going to, but I could give you probably some of the physical details of what I saw that day. And this is when I was 8 years old. Even right after that, around that same time, was when on my dad's side, my pop or grandfather, and there was a time that I had to use their bathroom. I can't remember. They had 2 separate bathrooms. Theirs in their bedroom, and the normal guest bathroom. And for some reason, I couldn't use the hall bathroom, so I had to use theirs in their bedroom. And I had asked and got permission, go in there. And as I'm going to the bathroom, I see a little magazine rack next to the toilet, and in there was Playboy magazines. And so as a young kid, you're kind of young boy, what's this? And you kind of start looking, you're like, whoa, okay. So those are my first introductions into pornography. And little did I know that it would take me on a path of nearly 30 years of an addiction. And that's what this is. It becomes an addiction. Now, it may start out simple, but if it's a continuous issue in your life, it becomes an addiction, just like any other thing that can become an addiction of drugs, alcohol, smoking cigarettes, whatever it may be, it can become an addiction. Now, this is interesting, and I'm going to give you some facts. I'm going to give you numbers, but I'm also going to put links in the show notes to go look at this, because this is not just me saying hope because of, this is what I see. These are facts. These are numbers that are given by industries, not just psychology industries, but even Christian industries that have done extensive studies on this. It shows that pornography is a $17 billion industry in society today. That's just staggering. Numbers show that the industry's annual revenue is more than the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball revenue combined. They also have more combined revenues than the three networks of ABC, NBC, and CBS combined. So we see how powerful Satan has using pornography in society. Now, when we look at a lot of this, we always hear temptation. I was tempted, and stuff like that. Well, temptation isn't a sin, but it becomes the sin when you dwell on it. And it all starts in the heart. And that's where it is why are you looking at this? At first it's just that simple, innocent, oh man, what's this? I found it, especially as a kid. And so many young people today at such an earlier age are trying to be influenced by scenes, trying to innocently put them in cartoons, TV kids shows, and even as they get to their preteens, of just inundating them with sexuality in the music videos, in the different shows that there are, magazines, books, going online. Now, again, like I said, temptation isn't a sin, but when it becomes to desiring something and dwelling on it, that is contrary to what God's best that He has for your life, then that temptation becomes a sin when you go after it and you enact on those sinful, wrongful desires. Like I said, being tempted to sin and sin itself are two separate things. And now here's the thing. Many of us, and even for me growing up in the churches I was a part of, was even if you thought about it, you were a sinner, you had sinned. But we are bombarded so much, especially in today's society, we are bombarded with so much of sexuality and imagery that our mind thinks and dwells on it. And again, it's not just you seeing something in passing or just that moment of glance, especially with an internet pop-up or whatever it may be, changing the channels on a TV, and you cross upon it and you keep going. You're not dwelling on it. But once you start dwelling on it, that's when it becomes that sin, because it's now planting a seed in your heart. And the thing is that a lot of times men have this shame that even though I'm thinking about it or I just caught a glimpse of it, I'm wrong and I've been condemned. And that was a lot of where, even for me growing up, was that dealing with a lot of this. And even at times now, I still have this feeling of shame that Satan tries to bring against me. And I'm really going to go in more details with this as we go. But as I said, there was this discussion with several of Christian brothers, and it just brought back a lot of some thoughts, and even a book that I had read years ago by a gentleman by the name of Michael John Cusick. And his book is called Surfing for God. And it was powerful because he talks and deals with about his struggles with pornography, but also as a counselor, and that's where his specialty is in a lot of ways, is helping men cope and deal and overcome this addiction. And so he talks about a lot of this in the book. And again, like I said, I'm going to put a link about this in the show notes. But he brings up this saying, the reality is that your heart needs something, and porn promises to meet that need. And that's just the way Satan likes to work. And again, this is like with all idols, pornography promises something we desire. In reality, it overpromises and underdelivers. And as you're thinking back, and I'm not trying to bring up a lot of desires and stimulation here, but I want you to really think about this, because a lot of times we block it out, or we just say, I don't have a problem. Many men, even for me being at the fire station, there's a lot of guys, and there was a lot of this stuff around. You had the TV channels, the certain movie channels that had pornography on it that you could watch at evening or whenever, and they had the magazines in the bathroom. Over the years, it's kind of dwindled, but even the talk and the communication in the firehouse, and not just that, but around other men, can get kind of vulgar sometimes. And it was like, you're just, like I said, you're constantly inundated with this. But when you think about it, it gives you these promises, but it falls so short. And John Eldridge talks about what makes porn so addictive is that more than anything else in a man's life, it makes him feel like a man without even requiring him to do a thing. In our minds, pornography makes us seem bigger, stronger, and more desirable. It affirms our manhood. We run to porn at times than normal intimacy with our spouse due to that fear of conflict. And so I was thinking about this. It is that part of, a lot of times we've had these fears of inadequacy, of we've got to be perfect because, again, of what we've seen in these images of these acts, and we feel like we can't live up to that, or we don't have that right body style, or whatever it may be. And so we have these inadequacies. We have these failures and fears in our mind. Even the conflict that may happen with our spouse during that time of intimacy. Now, here's the thing that has been a key phrase for me that has really stuck in my life these last few years, was from Dr. Cole. And I quote Dr. Cole quite a bit because, again, he is so influential in a lot of the books that how it transformed and really helped my life and my marriage. Now, Dr. Cole says, lust is the desire to benefit self at the expense of others, while love is the desire to benefit others at the expense of self. And that's just the way pornography works. It's a selfish desire. We're looking at self. We're looking at these images, and we're trying to just pleasure ourselves. You're trying to take that time of just your personal satisfaction without your spouse. And that's how Satan likes to work, because he tries to separate and divide and bring that division between you and your wife. Because then when you do have those times of intimacy with your wife, you have this expectation of what you've looked at and the stimulation and everything else, and it doesn't live up to that. And so then you become frustrated that they aren't fulfilling your desires and dreams or fantasies that you've built up, these expectations, as I said. Now, if you don't have something in your life that regularly inspires you, has an adventure, risk, a passion, beware, because if you don't, you will seek the counterfeit. And see, that is what Satan likes to do. Satan likes to bring the counterfeit. He's done it from the beginning of time, so there's nothing new that he hasn't tried in the past. And again, Dr. Cole says pornography is the counterfeit to prayer. If you're spending that time in prayer, then you're not really focusing on that. It's that counterfeit in a sense. Now, some of you, as you're listening, you may say, hey, I feel like I'm a Christian. I'm in church. I'm praying. I'm reading my Bible. But these temptations, these emotions, these feelings overwhelm me, and I just have to give in. Or I feel like I have to give in just to relieve the stress, relieve the temptation. Now, here's the thing. And I'm telling you from personal experience, for me, is you'll have this battle in your mind. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And Satan will say, you had a bad day. You've had this rough day. You were frustrated with work. Your wife wasn't listening to you. She didn't want to do She didn't want to be with you tonight. She didn't want to have sex. The kids are just aggravating you, getting you to that point. And it's like that. I just need to blow off some steam. And the best way for me to do it is to go look at something and to take care of that situation myself with masturbation. But yet, and Satan will make it. He will candy coat it to make it look so appealing that, hey, you're not hurting anybody. It's just you. Nobody sees you. You're not hurting your wife. You're just taking this time to relieve some pressure, some stress, and just vent. You're not, that way you're not being angry, mad, yelling, screaming, whatever, cussing. You're not doing anything. You're just taking this time to isolate yourself and take care of yourself on your own sense, pleasuring yourself. But here is the counter to that once you have done it, especially as a Christian, as soon as you've looked at the images, watched the video, and masturbated, what is it that Satan does? He comes at you again as an accuser and goes, man, you say you're a Christian man, and yet here you are, you're looking at this? He was just telling you it was okay, and now he's accusing you. He's a liar. He makes it look good, and then once you do it, he tries to guilt you and make you feel bad for what you've done. That is the typical pattern of Satan. It's not like something new. He has done this for generation to generation. And I'm saying men, but it's not just men. This is a growing concern in females as well. Studies show that not only does it have all these effects, but it also lowers your sexual satisfaction because it doesn't become enough. It comes that point of being insatiable. Nothing pleases you. That image that you may have first looked at in the Playboy magazine or the Penthouse or whatever one it was doesn't do it for you anymore. It's not satisfying. So you have to find something a little bit more intense. And here was the thing, growing up as a kid, you could go to the Blockbuster video or a video rental place, and they had movies, but they didn't really have those X-rated movies. Now, there were some stores that had those adult stores that had those movies off to the side or hidden in a sense, or those specialty stores specifically for all this. But you had that shame of, do I walk in here? What are people going to say? I cannot walk into this store. Or you go into a convenience store and you could see the shelves behind the cashier that had all the magazines with the little thing blocking. You could see the face, but you couldn't see the rest of the magazine. And that shame of buying the magazine. But over years, now you could get the subscription. It was sent directly to your house. And then the great thing in the 90s came around, the internet. Now it allowed it to come into the house discreetly, what we thought is discreetly. You could not have that shame of walking into a store, purchasing these items in public. Now you could look at it in the privacy of your home without any of that condemnation. But yet there's still that condemnation that comes because of this. We always hear the scriptures, and this is where I'm going now. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, and this is directly from the Ten Commandments. This is what God told Moses to tell the Israelites, and is our 10 Commandments. It says, you shall not commit adultery. But also in verse 17, it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's home. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his servant, nor his oxen, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. You can sit there and say, well, if I'm looking at something, how do I know they're married or not? But it's the fact that you are desiring somebody else. Because if you're married, and I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, if you're not married, then it's okay, because it still can have an effect on any of your relationships, whether you're dating someone, you're engaged, or you're married. This will have an effect on you and your relationship. But here's the thing. Then you go to, and people say, well, that's the Old Testament. Yeah, we live by the 10 Commandments, but that's the Old Covenant and the old laws that we live under. But then if you go to Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 and 28, they come to Jesus about some of the same situation. And this is the direct quote from Jesus. He says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery in his heart. And that's how it is. Again, it goes back to that temptation. The temptation isn't the sin, but when you start dwelling on it and coveting, you're committing that adultery in your heart towards that person, not just to the image that you're seeing or the act that you're watching, but what are you doing to that spouse, that your wife, that your relationship that you're in? You're doing damaging effect to that. And I know. And here's why I know. Like I said, I can tell you back, I told you back to when I first remember seeing Playboy magazines. I can tell you the different times I was able to rent certain movies because of a family member or spending the night with a friend in a sense, and us being able to turn on HBO or Cinemax, whatever it was, and seeing those R-rated and even X-rated movies. It was when the internet come around that you could be more discreet. And as I got into my teenage years and even getting married, how it's still that point of getting on the computer and looking at it at times when I felt like my wife was at work, just that stressful moments late at night, whether she'd already gone to bed, the kids were in bed asleep, and getting on the computer. And especially, for being on the fire department, if you didn't have, a side job or just whatever, you would have those times of being at home. And it was like, I'm just going to look for a little bit, just I've had a rough shift. I just need something to blow off some steam, and my wife's at work. And you get on to look, I'd get on the internet, get on the computer and look. And before I know it, it would be 3, 4, 5 hours of the day has already gone because I was looking at it. It was consuming my entire time. And that's, again, what Satan likes to do. He likes to take that time, take us, and just get us so consumed with other things than those responsibilities that we're to have in our life. Now, like I said, I'm sharing this. So for me, it was being consumed with a lot of this. And it got to that point that it was just with so much. And even then we got away from, hey, now you've got smartphones, and now you had this technology in your hands that you could look at it at any time that you wanted. And here was an interesting thing, was that, again, you could be anywhere. You could be at work. You could be just at any location. And if you could, discreetly looking on your phone at pornography. And that is the power that Satan has on you with that addiction, that it becomes so overwhelming of it's, again, getting that fix. How can I get my fix, my satisfaction? Just those urges and desires to just feel good, the release and just the pressure of getting through that moment. And that was the effects it was having on me. And not just me, because, again, like I said, there were things going on and I'm like, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm by myself. The kids aren't seeing it, but it was having that effect on my marriage, between the physical, the intimacy part, but also on the communicating, not sharing with her how I felt about things, the isolation, the shame. Then those times when she did catch me, I'm sorry, it won't happen again, I promise, and then a week later, here I am back on the computer, on the internet, looking again. It was just that vicious cycle of doing the same things over and over again, hoping things would change, but they never would. It's, that insanity. But you're in this vicious cycle. And again, like I said, it's that point of, that shame. But then it was those days of you want to, and Satan's like, oh, you're good. You had a rough day at the station. You're letting off some steam. And as soon as you did, look at you. I can't believe you did it. You call yourself a Christian. You sit on the pew, you do this, you attend church, you try to, all these things, all these accusations just to make you feel bad. Well, now that you have this shame, then when my wife would come home, it was like, then it was this become an argument because I didn't want to confront the situation and I was trying to hide it. So my best way of hiding it was through anger and just some resentment. And so that was that part that really hurt. And just, tore me apart and tore our relationship and our marriage, nearly tore it apart to the point that she said she wanted a divorce and was about to leave when there was that radical change in my life, addressing the situation, confronting it, and just getting into the Word and other things that really showed me what a man of God was supposed to do and how he's supposed to act, especially towards this situation of pornography. Now you can sit there and say, and this is the other thing that Satan likes to do, is he likes to, when you're thinking about this and trying to get the help, you're like, how can I get help? Because if I admit to this, people are going to look at me like, oh, I'm some deviant or some fiend, or, just that negative imagery. But that again is what Satan likes to do. He likes to separate and divide us, especially as men. If we have that unity, that band of brothers, and come together and fight for one another and stick up and help one another, then you have that strong bond. But if he can isolate you, get you away from the pack, kind of like that lone, the wolves, they go after that lone sheep that has wandered away. And that's what it is we've wandered away from the fold that God has for us in our lives. And then he separates us and, and gives us those fears and doubts and insecurities of what we're doing that nobody will understand. Nobody can know what we are going through and dealing with. But then once you do open up and you start talking to other men, you find out how common of a problem this is in society. We talk about epidemics and pandemics in society today regularly. And I think this is one that is an underlying issue that a lot of people don't talk about. We don't want to, it's a taboo thing to talk about. But I'm wanting to tell you guys, this is a normal conversation that needs to be had with your spouse if you're having issues, with your brothers, your coworkers, men in the church that have these issues that just not confronting them to a point, but just letting people know that there is help. Being able to talk to your kids, your sons and your daughters about all of this and the influence that what it can have on you, and how Satan's coming after you coming after them at that young age. And again, going back to Surfing for God book, he talks about man of integrity. Now, the Latin word integer means a whole. When you're thinking math and they talk about the integers and fractions and integers, the integer is that whole entire portion. While the number, like I said, it means whole, but for our part, it's also known as integrity. And that's what God has for us. He wants us to have that integrity, which is a whole, being whole, not just complete, but whole and holy. In Matthew chapter 23, verses 25 and 26, Jesus confronts the Pharisees as they come to him, accusing him of, asking him about some things. And he says, listen, you're consumed with the outside. Clean up the inside, and then the outside will come along with it. And so many times we want to just do this quick fix, and we don't really address the issues that are underlying. The thought that came to mind with this is a slab leak. We had a slab leak in a house years ago, and how it flooded the house. I mean, just flooded the living room, the laundry room, and everything. And we had to have the carpet removed. Had to put new carpet in, had to fix the concrete itself. But here's the thing. If we'd have just done that and then turned the water back on, we'd have had to replace it all over again. We had to fix those pipes. The not just the slab itself, but the leak that it had done that even deeper of the damage with the pipes. And we had to replace everything. But that's what we have to do, and that's what God wants to do, is he wants to come in and not just fix that surface issue, but he wants to get to the root and the heart of it and address it. And a lot of times we're afraid to, because it may bring up past hurts. Why were you introduced? Some of it may be a physical trauma, an abusive trauma. Somebody, you may have been abused as a child. You may have been introduced to pornography, different things. We see how society is today with the rise of child pornography, child trafficking, human trafficking, and all these things. But again, it's not just understanding the what of our sin that can't stop looking, but the why. Why does it promise to meet something in me that can't be fixed just on the outside? It goes something much deeper. And that's the thing. So many times I had sit there and said, I'm sorry. I'll do better. It won't happen again. But yet, like I said, down the road, here I am looking at it again. So we sit here and we say, and I'm talking about this, and this was what my issue was, and I'm letting you know the things that I struggled with and dealt with. But at the same time, like I said, I was like, how can anybody else know what I'm going through? How can anybody else understand the temptations, the desires, all these things that I was dealing with? And it was in reading a book a few years ago. And this is after everything has been working with going good with my wife and my marriage, our family. And I was already addressing the issue of pornography and going through that. Came across the book by quarterback Colt McCoy. He has a book called The Real Win. And it's a good book, just telling about all that he went through in his college career and his early pro career. But he also talks about his struggles with being tempted and different things that he dealt with. And there was that part of how could God really know the temptation that he was struggling with? And he brought these parts up. It's in Hebrews chapter 2, verses 17 and 18. It says, therefore, in all things, he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to aid those who are tempted. And then you go over to Hebrews 4, verses 14 through 16. It says, seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession, that we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And that's just it. We just read here, Jesus was tempted. And you're sitting there going, well, how can he have been tempted the way I was tempted? You know, there wasn't technology like it is today back then. But I guarantee you, Satan still came to him with temptations of flesh. We see that in the wilderness. You know, he was tempted to do things. And it talks about that lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. All three of those Satan brought to Jesus in the wilderness. And it's those same temptations that we deal with, that we face. So he can relate with us in those temptations, in that sin, because he saw when he died on the cross, he suffered that very sin and shame that we bore. It should have been everything that we've done, which should be against us, but he took it. He took it on the cross. And that's the powerful part, but he can relate. Yes, he can relate. Nobody else in society may be able to relate with your specific issues of pornography, whether it's an addiction or just a habit, however you want to define it, he can relate. And when I read that and saw that Jesus can relate to what I struggle with, that made it so understanding, that he, knowing my struggles, knowing those temptations, knowing that when you're overwhelmed and feel like just the enemy is overpowering you with those thoughts and urges and desires and temptation to just give in and do those things, look at them, that Jesus is right there, knowing that what you're going through, he has felt that as well. And he can sympathize to a point of giving you that comfort, giving you that peace. Now, does it come easy? No. There's still those struggles. Those temptations are going to rise. Satan's always going to come against us. It's not always going to come away as being a simple, once you live a life for Christ, that you don't have these problems anymore, that just vanishes. Now, there are those times that people can be delivered instantaneous and they never have to deal with those issues again. But like most addicts, whether it's a drug addict, alcoholic, smoking cigarettes even, it still has that addictive habit in your body and in your system that draws you. And Satan knows where these areas are, and he's going to use that to fight and come against you. Now, I said I had statistics. And again, like I said, here's the thing. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist or trained therapist. I'm just sharing from my personal experience of what God did for me, how he's helped me through this, and how even still, there are still those times of struggles and temptations, but it's being able to be open about those times of temptation instead of just hiding behind it and going and looking at it and just trying to get that release. And again, it comes back to you feeling the shame, but it's taking that time, allowing God to help you. But you also need a community with you to help you, that band of brothers that's going to help you, that accountability person. Yeah, just like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. There's all these drugs, Celebrate Recovery, all these places, they have accountability coaches, that sponsors, that people that you report to, that you can call, that have been through the same things as you. And they have them for pornography and sex addicts. They're out there. Sometimes it's being in that men's group that you can be able to share. It doesn't have to be with the whole group, but at least with one guy that you can be accountable to, and they can be accountable to you as well. Of knowing that, hey, when I'm struggling, can I call you? Can you pray with me? And different things, and having that person in your life, and not just your spouse or your children. Sometimes it's having that. Now, how do you go about protecting yourself? Well, again, the first key thing is getting in the Word, the praying, the reading the Word, seeking God, and staying occupied. Because again, it talks about that idle mind, that how Satan wants to use that idle mind. So it's finding the time, not to say that Satan's not going to come against you. He's still going to attack, but it's being prepared that when you know how his tactics are, you're better prepared for the battle. So it's, again, now you put into place those things to protect. You know, if it's having a certain movie channel in the house, unsubscribe to it. You know, whatever you got to do, block it. Now there's things out there that are for your internet that you can safely block sites trying to pop up, or even if the kids or yourself or whoever it may be trying to search things, it will block them. Now the issue is, and from what I've seen and talking and looking at a lot of stuff about this, now for your home internet, there are good devices out there, you know, services, blockers that you can put on your Wi-Fi and the internet. But when it comes to the mobile on your phone, there are still behind on that part of the technology, because there's still some ways around it, unfortunately. So it's having to, again, have somebody that you're accountable to, whether you're handing them your phone, whatever it may be. You've got to be authentic and transparent. You can't be hiding, like going in and they say, well, this is the day I'm going to look at your phone. And then like the night before, you go and clear your browser history. I mean, these are the typical tricks that we use. I'm telling you, I know I used them. Go in, clear out your history. YouTube, you clear out your history, your viewing history, whatever it may be. These little things. So there's still ways around part of this, but it's being open, especially for the friend of mine with his sons. He come to him and he's telling us he had this open discussion with his two boys. And at the same time, though, he was telling them, I'm accountable to you. You're accountable to me. He was being that transparent dad that we should all be, of accountability, not just to them, but for him himself. And here's this list that I have. I want to share with you some statistics about all this, because, again, it's mind-blowing. Even for what I dealt with, I never really looked at a lot of this numbers. But, again, I want you to be aware of what it can have on your marriage, on your family, on your spiritual life, and even in society with your work and everything that's going on. Here are some numbers. And this is through the Conquer series. And I'm putting links to all these reports so that if you want to read them yourself, you're more than welcome. It says that over 40 million Americans regularly visit porn sites. The average visit is over 6.5 minutes. There are around 42 million porn websites, which total around 370 million pages of pornography. Like I said earlier, the pornography industry's annual revenue is more than the NFL, NBA, and MLB combined. And it is also more than the combined revenues of ABC, CBS, and NBC. 47% of families in the United States report that pornography is a problem in their home, while pornography use increases the marital infidelity rate more than 300%. 11 is the average age that a child is first exposed to pornography, and 94% of children will see porn by the age of 14. 56% of American divorces involves one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. 70% of Christian youth pastors report that they have had at least one teen come to them for help in dealing with pornography in the last 12 months. 68% of church-going men and over 50% of pastors view porn on a regular basis. Of youth Christian adults ages 18 through 24 years old, 76% say they are actively searching for it. 59% of pastors say that married men seek their help because of porn, while 33% of women ages 25 and under search for porn at least once a month also. It says only 13% of self-identified Christian women say they've never watched porn, while 87% of Christian women say they have seen porn at some point in their life to even help with their marriage. And again, some of these statistics are just the fact of every second over $3,000 is being spent on pornography. Again, and we, like I said, it's not just that men are being consumed with it. It says 1 in every 3 viewers now are women. The ages of people going to the sites are not just in the middle age. You know, it's varying from ages of teenagers to older adults. The number of search terms that are being looked for in the millions. 75 million keyword searches include the word sex, 30 million include adult dating, while 23 million include the words pornography. 25% of all search engine requests are pornography related. That is 68 million a day. 20% of men admit to watching porn online at work. And like I said, the average age that people are saying that when they were exposed to pornography is the age of 11. There are 116,000 searches every day for child pornography. Now, here's the thing. We sit there and say, I'll never get to that point. You know, and I pray that nobody does get to that point. But unfortunately, we're in a society today that things happen, unfortunately, and we see how people thrive for this, and people are being exposed day in and day out. Now, I guarantee you their initial start was not for child pornography or the rape or the incest or whatever that they get caught up in. It'd be like saying, we look at the drug addict and we're like, man, why did they get to this point? How did they, and it's not so much that, I guarantee you, if you talk to most drug addicts or even alcoholics, it started with one simple, maybe it was a pain pill. Maybe it was just one glass of beer or wine, whatever it may be. But over time, it wasn't enough. And it's that addictive personality, that addiction trait in people that just triggers, I got to have more. I got to want more. And like I said before, it doesn't satisfy you. So you become insatiable of, I've got to have more. What's going to give me that pleasure, that release, that satisfaction that didn't do it before. And so it's finding something that's harder, more intense, more aggressive, whatever it may be, that to feel that pleasure to stimulate. And we're seeing how then it progresses to the child pornography, the trafficking, the going to the prostitute, going to taking it outside of the marriage and those affairs, those relationships, and just destroying families, destroying marriages, because we've seen how many have led to an affair. And a lot of even pastors, you can look at those pastors that have fallen and they'll say, well, I didn't just jump into the affair. It was over time. And if you really look back into it more, it was because of pornography. And that's the issue that we're facing. And I just wanted to take that time to share with you, again, what I went through. And I know other guys, y'all are dealing with it. And I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not dealing with this alone. Like I said, I gave you some numbers of how many people are struggling with it. But again, it's that we hide behind it, that it's taboo to talk about. And I want to be able to open up and let you know the struggles that I dealt with, and that you're not alone. And that, no, I may not be able to communicate with you and help you through those times. But again, it's you being aware that God does know the struggles that you're dealing with. Like I said, it said Jesus, He's that comforter. He is our intercessor. He goes before God to intercede for us. And the only way that he can intercede, just as the high priest did in the Old Testament, he is that New Testament high priest because he can relate to the struggles that we deal with, those temptations, those urges, those addictions that we deal with. No, he did not have an addiction, but he bore the sin and shame of the addiction that we have in our lives. And he can take that and give you the peace, give you the reassurance that when you come to him in that time of prayer, asking for forgiveness, that he can provide that comfort. That doesn't mean you can go out and do it again just because you've gotten it off your chest. That confession, oh, I'm good. Let me go do something. I can go back to it because I've cleaned my slate. No, it's that part of you fix it, but then you work around not just that temporary fix, but the permanent fix, that it doesn't become an ongoing problem. And it's getting that help. And like I said, God can deliver you. And it's great when God does that instantaneous delivering of an addiction. But for most people, it's going and getting that help, getting that counsel, getting in those support groups. Like I said, Alcoholics Anonymous, Celebrate Recovery. There's the sexual addictionaholics or whatever. There's websites and there's places that you can go, going to your pastor, going to those that you can go to confidently in knowing that they're not going to tell your situation to others, but they can give you the counsel and lead you in the right directions. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do, is to get that help. Go in those right directions of seeking the counsel, seeking the support, finding even those brothers that you can confide in, that they're not going to tell your business, but they're going to be there, not just say, oh, it's okay, you'll get through this, but actually hold you accountable for your actions and lift you up in prayer. So I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of the 318 Project. Like I said, this is a personal issue that I struggled with for so many years. And at times, like I said, there's still those temptations that Satan wants to come against you. But to let you know that you're not alone, you can overcome this. You can get the help that you need. And guys, I'm going to be praying for you. And if you can, still remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with other men. And again, guys, I want you to have that blessed and wonderful day.
Thank you for joining on this adventure of integrity and honor in godly masculinity. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with other men. And remember to keep building faithful men.